everyone. Welcome to Word Live Wednesday. Notice the S is a 5. We are clever because we are live at 5 every Wednesday talking about books from words to stores, although today we're represented by everyone in their home, which is all fine. Sometimes we're live from home. So I'm Rachel, and I'm in Jersey. And today we're going to, of course, talk about books that we're reading and that we love, but we're also going to talk about the magic and wonder that is Bookstagram. Hashtag books. That's like an old person. I'm so old. Hashtag Bookstagram. And so we have two amazing guests today. Holly really is like our guest host because she is a wordie. She is a bookseller in Brooklyn and a bookstagrammer. And hi, Holly.
Hi, I'm pulling double duty.
That's right.
We both guest and host.
Exactly. Like all of us in the book industry, we all have 14 jobs.
We had multiple hats to put on.
Exactly. And then we also have, and this was one of the fun things about doing these Word Live Wednesday shows is that the people that we follow and pay attention to on social media, we can have an excuse to talk to them. And so I've been so delighted watching everything that our guest Deedi from Deedi Reads does online, and she visits Word and makes so many fun videos. I'm going to ask you about so many of them, especially the dancing ones with all the positive news. I love those. I don't know the people, and I love it still. We're going to start talking about that and maybe do a little. We'll think that we'll start a little kind of remedially for people who are just like Bookstagram, what, and then maybe get a little deeper in the weeds. If that sounds, is that cool for you guys?
Cool.
All right. Awesome. So question to both of you is Bookstagram. How'd you fall down that rabbit hole? Tell us your journey into the space.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I think you've been on Bookstagram a lot longer than I have, so I'm excited to hear your side of this. But I had a college friend named Joanne. She's Books and Broadway with some underscores in there. That I followed for years on my personal account, and I was like, I want to be posting this, so maybe I can. I didn't realize it was a whole world. I thought she was just super cool and unique and had like come up with this idea. And then she kept sharing other book accounts, and I was like, oh, this is something I can do. So last December 2019, I made an account, and it's just been great. So fun, and I annoy everyone around me by talking about books constantly, so it gives me a place to talk about books. Before I started working at Word, it gave me a place to talk about books with other people who also wanted to talk about books.
Yeah, that's the best part. That's like why we're there, for sure.
Yeah.
Holly, we briefly lost your video, but we can still hear you.
Oh no, weird. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it helps if you go off and then come back on. Okay, and that's what she's done.
All right. I can see you now.
Maybe. Great.
We good? Okay, cool. Okay, so my Bookstagram origin story. Yeah, so I've had my account for quite a while. Actually, I was just looking, and I'm going to hit my 1,000th post at the end of this month, and I am trying to figure out how I'm going to celebrate that. I'll probably do like a fun giveaway or something. But for a really long time, I had started the account because I was like, I feel this compulsive need to take photos of my books as I read them, and I would like my friends and family to be able to opt in to all the photos of the books instead of just bombarding them with books all the time. And so it started like literally just that, like it was just a for fun thing. And then I found a couple of other people who were talking about books on Instagram, and I started to get more familiar with like the role that bookstagrammers play in like the book publicity process, and helping to write reviews and hype up books. And I wanted to get involved in that. So at that point, I also put up my blog, which is deedispeaking.com, and started putting reviews not only on the blog, but also on, obviously Goodreads. And now we have the Story Graph, which is so great. So great. I know, I love them. And so that's how I started getting into reviews. And then of course I discovered NetGalley, which is a website where reviewers can request early like e-copies of books. And it sort of all exploded from there. And a couple of years ago, I decided like, I'm really loving this. I'm connecting with so many people because like I'm married and like my husband's a lawyer and he doesn't like read fiction or whatever. So I was like, I need other people to like talk about books with on a daily basis. And so I was having so much fun with that I decided to start really, putting more time toward Bookstagram and building up that community. And it's been a lot of fun and it's grown since then. But it's just like the best part is that you find all these people who I like to read literary fiction, like Booker Prize literary fiction, and then like fantasy. And so how often do you encounter people in your life who like have like weird genre mashups who are like their favorites like that? And I found so many people and I thought I was all alone. And that's the magic of Bookstagram.
Oh, I have so many questions. That is like, it's so exciting. And I love, it really does have organic origins, right? It's about finding other people who can get excited about what you're getting excited about on the reading front. But wow, it's a lot of content.
Yeah, it is.
You mentioned, you're going to have your 1,000th post. And as someone who works also on content, I mean, it's easy to produce lots of garbage content, but you're not doing that. Both you and Holly are very thoughtful. A lot of copy, a lot of design talent, honestly. Like you have an eye for it. Because when I take a picture of a book, it looks like I took a picture of a book with my camera phone. But yours looks stylized. And so I'm curious, like, how have you kind of evolved your aesthetic? Like, is it inspiration from others? Have you spent a lot of time in Canva? Do you do tutorials? Like, how do you get everything to look so pretty?
You should take this one, Deedi. I can follow up. You've got a gorgeous feed.
Thank you. So, I mean, it is like, you learn over time. Like I've been doing it a while. I've done Pinterest in the beginning. Like, I'm like, what do I like? Right. And so starting with like saving people's posts into like a folder in Instagram, I'm like, this is like a really nice way to just show a single book. Like, I like how they did that. And then, going back and refining, I do use Canva. Like I do, spend some time in there. I also work at a startup where they like our social media team pays attention to the layout of like the Instagram grid when you land on a person's profile. So I learned, sort of how to do that from watching them at work. I sort of like pick these things up, all over the place. The other thing is I will not, like, I'm not going to lie. I definitely bought my first iPhone that had portrait mode in it, like for Bookstagram. Like I was like, I'm going to buy this like fancy iPhone so that I can take portrait mode with books. So like, I'm also out there on an iPhone, but you pick up tricks like turning on the grid on the camera, right? So like you can, in your camera settings, you can turn on the grid to help make sure that things are straight and centered and making sure that your whites are really white and your horizons are level. And like, those are just sort of things I picked up from reading like blogs about, how to take really good photos at home. But it took a while, but I really love the way that it came out. And like, also obviously like, my shelves are partially inspired by like their photography, but also like, so they go across my living room and, they have the added benefit of just bringing me joy every day. So I think that, they're worth it on many fronts. I figure if you're going to live in a 1-bedroom tiny apartment in the New York City area, like you might as well, and you're going to own 500 books, like you might as well make them an installation.
Totally. It's so funny what you said about the phone because I got the upgraded iPhone with the portrait mode, and my husband joked, he's like, it's really a business purchase. It's an investment in, which is totally how I use it. I feel like one of the things that's fun about Bookstagram is that everyone is so supportive of each other in terms of like when someone signs up to Bookstagram, everyone's like, "Yay, welcome, woo!" But
new
on top of
Bookstagrammer.
that, like, hey, I really like how you did that photo. Nobody's proprietary about it. They're like, oh, here's the tutorial that I've read, or here's the person I followed and learned how to do that. So like at my very first photo, I look back on it and I like literally just held my book up. I didn't filter it. I didn't do anything to it. And it looks fine, but once I saw how much effort people were putting in, it didn't feel over processed. It just felt like it was full of care. And so I started like Deedi did, saving photos of like, oh, I love that positioning, or I never would have thought to combine things that way.
Yeah.
It's like little inspiration.
I also try to make my life a little easier by, taking a week's worth of photos on the weekend, and planning out like for the week ahead. And I do that like partially like what do I want to talk about, and partially like what, how will the grid like look in conjunction with one another. And I use a tool called Planoly, which like lets you sort of like upload photos and then rearrange them to see how they work together. And so I found that like doing that allows me to sort of puzzle piece together like what, how different things look and how they balance together. But also like, I find that it's really helpful from a content creation standpoint to have like a couple of templates. So for like a really long time, over a year, I always did like backlist Fridays. And so on Fridays, like I always like posted about a backlist title. And, now, like, as you mentioned, I have these like weekly happy dances, and those like go up on Sundays. Like, I know that I have that, like, and it's one less, it's like something that people love, and, something that takes a little bit less like creativity, but still makes me feel really engaged. And I think that that's another like good hack for content creation when you're posting every day.
That's one thing that I think that started me, aside from the fact that, I first started noticing because, working on Word's social media, of course you'd tag us and I'd notice that, but I just love the joy of it. And what you said, Holly, about like, there's no competition and everyone's like, that's cool, here's how I do it, is such a wonderful part of it. And it's, it's the book community, which can get a bad rap sometimes. It just feels like what's happening on Twitter as opposed to Instagram feels very different, right?
I'm on both places and I can confirm.
Right. It's very different. It's just obviously a very different medium. It's been around, Twitter's been around for a longer time. It has a different place and a function, but there's something about that joy on Instagram and that like really pulling everybody together, celebrating books. It's all about like getting people to read the stuff you love. And it's not about disparaging anything or knocking anything. And I absolutely love that about it.
Yeah. And you can find like a really niche like Bookstagram community too. Like, and that's like part of why I love how big Bookstagram, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Bookstagrammers out there, but you can like, there are like, the fantasy Bookstagrammers who have like all the Funko Pops, right? And then there are like kid lit Bookstagrammers who like review like children's books and like everything in between. And you can really, and I fall somewhere in the middle, like, and there's a place for that too. And I think that that's a lot of fun because you really get to find your people. And also it means that there are no wrong answers because, when I first started, I was following a lot of fantasy Bookstagrammers and I was like, oh, my feed has to look like this. But that wasn't true. And I learned over time that like, I was just sort of like in a little bubble of like everybody's feed looked like that, but there were lots of other ways to go about it. There are no wrong answers.
Yeah. Did you find, so over the past year, talking about community and the community of Bookstagrammers and people who love reading, over the past year when everyone's, who could be at home was at home, obviously booksellers were on the front lines and working throughout most of the pandemic, as were, many of people in retail and first responders and all of those industries. But there were a lot of people at home. And at the very least on the weekend, you were stuck at home, even if you did have to go to work because of the nature of your work. Did you find that the community expanded? Like, were more people hungry for an online space because they weren't going to in-person book talks? They weren't meeting in the halls of their local bookstore? What did the vibe change last year, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Do you want to take that one, Holly?
I mean, I was still pretty new. I had just started a few months before the pandemic hit, but I was surprised at how many people I developed friendships with that started at the beginning of the pandemic. So they posted a lot of 1-year anniversary pictures in the last couple months, and I didn't realize at the time how many people that I was connecting with were fresh to the space too. Because because a lot of them seemed really practiced and really good at it already. And I was like, oh, if you look at my back feed, it looks very different. But it did feel, I would, in your experience, TV, the one who like watched the change. If you felt like that was true.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, definitely we saw new people. There are also like people, you know, coming all the time, which is, so, you know, I wasn't necessarily like, oh, all of a sudden there are all these new bookstagrammers, but it was nice to just sort of, there's always like new bookstagrammers, which is a lot of fun. But I do think that, like, from my perspective, you know, one thing that I really noticed is that people were having trouble concentrating on books. And so a lot of people like started feeling like that was like sort of like an existential crisis. Like they're like, I identify as a reader and I can't sit here and read. Like my brain won't do it. And we were able to all bond over the fact that, you know what, there's nothing wrong with that. Like we're in a pandemic, like we're stuck at home. You know, whether you cope by like reading more or if your brain wants you to just, you know, scroll Instagram endlessly, like guess what? You can talk about books while you do that. And so I was really excited about the way that like the community stayed together even when like people were exhausted by things that were online. And also to your point, like I loved that there were so many book launches online and on Zoom and on Instagram Live. And I think a lot more people, because I, you know, grew up in a really small town in upstate New York, and they're like the closest bookstore is probably like 30 miles away, right? So I never went to any, you know, like author talks or book launches or things like that growing up. And obviously I moved to New York and I was like, this is great. Like I'm going to all of them, right? And I totally did. But so many more people like across the country and so many more bookstagrammers in like more rural areas, I think, got to experience like author events for the very first time. And like you can like they signed book plates and they shipped out a signed book, and everybody sort of got to like enter into this this like new corner of the book world, which I also just loved.
Did you see any, just a side, because I'm always really curious about, on one hand, I love that the Zoom events and the online events kind of democratized the book events and you could go from anywhere. Were there any you thought were particularly effective, or like, did you see anything out there over the past year and change that was like, oh, that's cool? Or was it more about, less about the format and more about the people? Like the authors, you know what I'm saying? Like, was it more about author pairings that were particularly magic, or did anybody do anything cool format wise?
I mean, I definitely like saw some great author pairings. I listened in when Brandon Taylor interviewed C. Pam Zhang when How Much of These Hills is Gold, and that was on Instagram Live, and they're like best friends from like their MFA program, and then we're both like longlisted for the Booker Prize together. So like that was cool, right? And they don't live in the same city, so like for them to be able to do an event together was really neat. But I also attended a really cool one. So I attended one of the launch events for A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir, which was like obviously like a massive like book launch because people had been, you know, waiting years for this like finale of a 4-book series. And they had like a VIP package that you could buy for like $5 extra or something. And you got like a one-on-one video chat with the author for like 2 minutes or something. So like it was like this platform where you could log in and it like you had 2 minutes to be like, I love you.
That's awesome.
And she was like, thanks. And then you get to take a screenshot, right? And so that was really cool because like, you know, having been to author events in New York, like that's like mimics the real life where you walk up to the table and you hand them your book and you're like, I love you, right? And they're like, thanks. And they sign the book and take a photo, right? And so that was, you know, that was obviously like a more high-tech event, and you know, it was a much larger operation, but like the creative ways that that these things were able to be available to people everywhere was just awesome.
I wonder, I have a really bad problem. I have like zero author game. Like I'm so embarrassing. Yeah. I mean, and I've been like a publicist, like that's how I started and it taught me nothing. Like I'm so lame, but I wonder if I'd be just as bad in video probably.
I met Brandon Sanderson at BookCon one time. And he was like, I was like, hi. And it was my first BookCon, right? Like I was like very new. I had just moved to the New York area. And he's like signing my books and he's like, do you have any questions for me? And I was like, no. He was like, all right, that's fine. You don't have to. Thanks for coming. And I was like, so yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, my greatest shame is at a Comic-Con many years ago, before Game of Thrones was on HBO, but still very popular. Someone introduced me to George R.R. Martin when he could walk freely and told me a bit about his series. And I said, huh, that sounds super fun, but it's just not my jam.
Oh, no.
And you know what? He was so nice, and we had a great, like, he was in our booth hanging out for like 45 minutes. This is before he had like guards and like, you know, phalanx of beautiful women around him. But yeah, can you believe, like, I'm like, Rachel, what are you doing? Shameful, but honest.
I love that story. Love that story.
And then I do have a picture of him with me at a Comic-Con years past, and he had no recollection, and I was drunk. So anywho,
if you meet him nowadays, that's got to be how you are anyway.
Exactly, right? So I'm going to ask one more Bookstagram focus question, and then I figure we can unleash ourselves on some book recs. And that is, I think that some folks are curious about the economies of Bookstagrammers. And you say there's so many Bookstagrammers, and obviously I know that some folks, not all, but there's sponsored posts, there's different partnerships with folks and all of that. I mean, what percent, how many people are making any money off of it? You know what I mean? A little peek into how the sausage is made in the Bookstagram world. Is it really just for the love of it? Is anybody making some money off of this? Just as like, and God bless them for doing it. I'm just curious. I think people have an impression that there are people who are like really making, quit your job money for Bookstagram. And is that the case? Or is it more like you can get some takeout Thai food and not feel guilty about it? Money.
I don't think anybody is going to quit their job and become a Bookstagrammer. There are like a couple of accounts that like really, they got into Bookstagram before Bookstagram was a thing, and they became really big, and they have like 100,000 followers, and maybe they have a Patreon account, right? That like brings in, like they have some really committed people, and maybe they do some sponsored content, every once in a while. But I don't think that, I'm 99% sure that that's not like, like a career level of income. And I think that I think when people first come in, because really like, I do it because I love books, and also like candidly, like when you are reviewing a lot of books, you get sent a lot of free books. And so and like, that's like enough for me. Like, I'm like, you want to send me free books? Like, great. I will absolutely read and review them. Like I said to my husband, I was like, if you could like go see the Yankees games for free because you posted about it on Instagram, like, wouldn't you do it? Right. Like, because you love the thing. But so I think that when people are new and they see like, hashtag partner or like, like that kind of language, like those are like required FTC disclosures when you receive a book for free. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting like paid in cash. And, so like some partners, they'll ask you to like tag them as like, as a brand partner in the post. And then it says like paid partnership with like XYZ. That also doesn't necessarily mean that you're like making money. That could mean that you got like the books for free, or that you have a subscription for free. Okay. Sometimes, I'll get like a DM from, I don't know, like there was like blankets or something, right? And they're like, we want to send you this like product in exchange for like you posting about it. And I think that in that kind of situation, it's okay to be like a little bit discerning. Like, okay, if you want the comforter, like cool, like sure, like I'll take it and post like a free comforter. But like, if that's not something necessarily, and I think that like, especially once you have an established presence, and it doesn't have to be huge, but if you have like good engagement on your account, and this isn't something that you were, necessarily going to seek out, like I always encourage people to ask, like say like, I would be willing to post this for, $25, or like, just like whatever you think feels right based on, your engagement. And, I've had brands say like, nope, we don't pay for placed content. And I'm like, that's fine too. Like, cool beans, like, and so I think that there are opportunities like that. But if you're getting into Bookstagram because you think that there's money in it, I would encourage you to not do that. because there is not. It's really just like books.
Why is everything in book world like that?
Right. And also like, do you want it? Do you want books to be a job? Like, I mean, obviously not with book selling, but like, do you want like reviewing books like all the time and like creating content and like scrolling on Instagram at like 10 p.m.? Like, do you want that to feel like a job? Like some things, I think I'm a big fan of like not monetizing your hobbies if you can like afford to not monetize your hobbies, because you're going to get burned out, you know, like you don't want it to feel like something that you have to do.
I feel like it's very similar to like any influencer area of Instagram, but even less paid. Kind of like Rachel said, like it's like a book thing, because you do get, I feel like the volume of free books, there's like this tipping point when all of a sudden you can get free books if you want them. And you either get sent them or you can just ask. And once you have enough people who care about what you have to say, and it's a fairly low bar compared to other influencer areas. Mm-hmm. That's definitely the main way that you would get any sort of compensation. I feel like I see quite a few people get, for the subscription boxes, get some sort of subsidized either discount or a free 3 months or something like that. But definitely don't quit your day job and start a Bookstagram account.
Yeah, no. And I think another thing that I did that I was surprised to learn, I think when I was very small, and I'm still not like, I don't have like a huge account, but like, you know, when you're first starting out and you see like these larger accounts and they're like, I have this giant stack of free book mail, and you're like, their life is so cool because they just like these books show up at their doorstep and they're like, oh my God, surprise books. They like probably requested them, right? So like you come to learn as you grow that there are like email lists, and like publishers will say like, you can request 3 books this month, and then you do, and then they send them, right? So it's not like I mean, sometimes you get surprise books, but like it's much more often that like, you know what's coming and what's going to come in the mail because you have a relationship and you've requested, or they've requested of you. So I think it's still very cool and like obviously like very exciting to get free books. But I would also say that like, if you're just starting out, like it's not this magical like surprise free books, like, you know, like free for
I'm
all,
so
like,
glad
you know.
you brought that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I first got on and so many people were posting like book mail, I thought that all of that was surprise mail. And I was like, oh my gosh,
I thought that too. And that's not so.
How did they get their addresses?
Yeah.
Where are these books coming from? And then I realized that sometimes people posted book mail when it was a book they literally ordered, not even got for free.
Yeah, sometimes people do that. Yeah.
Oh, so book mail just means like books in the mail. There's like no fancy.
Yeah.
But it's
and I do try to like make sure that I say when I'm like sharing books that I purchased, like where I bought them, and you know that the fact that I bought them because of that, right? Like I don't, especially because like one thing that I talk a lot about and care very deeply, and like I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's like shopping from local bookstores and like not, you know, like putting your money where your values are. And I know that like there's a lot of like considerations about, you know, economics in there and privilege, but you know, where possible, like buying from independent bookstores. And I want to make sure that people know that like I'm doing that, right? Like I'm not just like, hey, you should like spend a little bit extra to shop at your local bookstore, but I get all my books for free. Like I want to make sure that I'm saying like, hey, I went to this bookstore and I bought this book, and like you know what I mean? Like sharing that too. And so that's one thing that I think that you know, is important to say in regards to book mail, is like, hey, I ordered this from bookshop.org or what have you.
And isn't it really funny? And I say this as I just went up to Woodstock for a couple of days last week. And of course went to the Golden Notebook, which is in Woodstock and is a great store. And I absolutely loved it. And I went to the bookstore that's in Kingston. That's also a bar.
The Rough Draft.
Rough Draft.
What a space. If I lived, I would live there inside there. And of course, I bought something, more than one thing, at every store I went to. And my husband is like, Rachel, you just told me how many books you have at home to go through. But like, I have to. buy. I bought both of these at Rough Draft. I mean, I still have my thing. I am so filled up right now with books. And I ask for my own sanity. And because I've had that pandemic reading problem, I used to whip through 100 books a year, no problem. And I am real slow right now and working on it. But how do you manage TBRs? Because Holly, both from Bookstagram and when you work at a bookstore, you get galleys. You can download stuff from Edelweiss. There's shelf. There's a lot of ways. So how do you guys manage? And have you gotten much pickier over time about what you request?
Yes. I mean, for a while, I actually found a lot of people I've spoken to on Bookstagram have said that it helped them kind of hone their taste. Like, Deedi, you articulated really clearly, like, these are my two spaces. But when I first joined, I actually had a hard time remembering what I liked. I felt a lot of pressure to read what everyone was posting about. And there was a phase where, like, everything I read just, like, didn't hit the mark for me. And I had to remember, okay, I have to go back to the books that I like reading. If I learn about a book that sounds interesting to me, then great. And I think it brought me back to, I know I love nonfiction and I know I love literary fiction, and I'm going to just stick in that space and it's going to be great. And it definitely has changed my TBR. And also another thing on Bookstagram is how many people post TBRs. And sometimes I'm mostly a mood reader. And so there was this mix, like any social media experience, of like pressure versus authenticity of, I need to pick out my 6 books for August versus maybe I can have a rough idea of what I'm reading next. So now I'm not going to turn my computer on and show you because my room is a mess, but I have a section on my windowsill where I keep books that I'm like most want to get to. And then when I need a new book, I pick from there instead of all of my stacks. And it just helps me like focus in a little bit, but I don't set a hard one anymore.
I am like a super planner. Like I am like the most like I used to, when I was in college, I used to do all my homework 1 week ahead of time. Like if it was due next Monday, I did it this Monday. Like I called it my emergency fund of time. Like I'm like that person. Okay. So like
wow.
And so when it comes to my TBR, I have a couple things to say. First of all, I'm absolutely a TBR planner. I actually use Airtable, which is like a fancy spreadsheet, and it's awesome, and I love it. Like I live in it, right? And it has actually also become my like catalog of my home library, and I have everything marked whether I read it or not. And what I love about it is that like it helps me keep track of things like library due dates and publication dates if I'm reading an advanced copy, and like buddy reads, and sort of like I can tag things like, and I have a blog post on my blog like about it, and you can actually like view my TBR if you want, but then you have to promise not to judge me for my neurosis. But so within that, I also have a short list and a super short list. Okay, I promise I'm not like truly crazy, maybe, but like so my super short list, right, is the same as like your windowsill, where it's like, okay, I know that like this month I have like these books that are coming out this month. I've got like, one thing that I like to do is read through prize nominee lists. And so I actually have a monthly book club called Booker of the Month, where we read one of the Booker long listed books every month. And so we get through almost the whole long list before the next year's long list is announced, which is like tons of fun. And we've like got a great group that comes every month. But so like the Booker prize list, and then like the women's prize, I also try to do the Hugo and like the National Book Award. So the only way for me to do that is to like spread them out throughout the year, right? So it also helps me, like the way that I see the planning is that like I've got all these things that I want to do, and like the only way I can make sure they happen is to plan out how I'll get there, and that's what gives me like I really get a lot of fulfillment out of that. But I'm like, okay, so maybe I have like these like 12 books that I'm going to read this month. And then if I get through all of those, I'll pull off the super short list, which is like, the like, I want to read these this month, but like, I need to also be realistic. So like, that's how I manage mine. And like, you do have to get picky when you are, and I think that that's like something that like, you never like grow your account out of, like you're going to get books and you're not going to get to them. And like they know that, right? And as long as you're like, you share them in your stories and like, you know, things like that, like it's not like, it doesn't have to be a lot of pressure. And I like to remind myself that like books are there for you when you get to them, right? Like they're not judging you. Books don't have eyeballs that like throw you shade, right? They're not like, it's your TBR is like not judging you. It's not an inanimate object, right? Like they are joy machines that you can pick up when you get to them, and then you have joy, right? And so I think that helps a lot as well. But the last thing that I'll just say is that, like, to your point about getting picky, and like similar to you, Holly, I have really gotten good at anticipating which books I'm going to like and which I'm not, right? And I think that like there's also, so I don't give star ratings when I review books. I mean, obviously like you have to in like Goodreads and whatever, but like on my blog and on Instagram, because they're so subjective, right? And also because I feel like every book I read is like 4 or 5 stars. And like, I don't have any shame in that, because like when your list is a mile long, like nobody has time to read books that don't promise to be excellent, right? Like I'm only going to pick up books if I have 500 books, right? Like a third of them are unread and like probably more waiting for me at the library. And like, I have to be really picky about the ones that I know that I'm going to love. And I feel like over time I've gotten much better at that, but it's like, you have to trial and error, like you said, Holly.
God, and I also love, I'm a library user. Like, what is with us, man? We are just getting those books. Like, if the ice cream man brought the books, we would get them from the ice cream man.
And ice cream, obviously.
I've got a library stack right now that's 7 books high, and I'm like never going to hit my deadline. But sorry, Holly.
No, it's fine. I wish I had looked up the term beforehand, but I get so much solace out of this article I read a few years ago about, because obviously in my circle of in real life people outside of Word, I have way more books than most people, and for a long time I felt like a lot of pressure to like get through them and justify why there was books that I was buying, even though I hadn't gotten through all of them. And there was this article that there's some psychological term for it, but like being surrounded by books that you can't get to in your life is actually a signal of humility. It's like this awareness that there's stuff that you don't know in the world. And so I was like, oh, now I feel so fine about having all of these books around, because they are toy machines. And when I get to them, it's going to be the perfect time for me to read that book. I just finished Radium Girls, and I've had that on my shelf for 3 years. And I loved it. And that didn't mean that I was deprioritizing it. It just wasn't what I picked up at the moment.
Yeah.
And now whenever I want something, I'm surrounded by things that I'm so excited to pick up.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Holly, you really inspired me when you read that for that reason, because I'm like, oh, that book's been out for a while. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter, but there was something about like, just, it was a good reminder that it's not all new, because I get caught up in the new too when thinking about choosing staff picks or what's happening at Word in general, because there is constantly new material coming in every Tuesday.
There's so many books. I'm like, can publishing just like take like the summer off?
I know. I used to say that when I worked in publishing, I was just like, what about we just half it? We just
You're like, all the readers would love it if we just stopped for a couple of months.
And meanwhile, like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it's been something really fun to be in both the book selling and the Bookstagram world, because prior to becoming a bookseller, I had no idea that books came out on the same day of the week. I did not realize how many books came out every month. And I had somebody I interact with a lot on Bookstagram was like, you should like highlight the books that are coming out, because we see the ones that people are getting sent, but we don't. I posted kind of offhand one day, there is 6,000 books coming out this month. And somebody was like,
I don't like that.
I'm not lying. There are 6,000 books making their way into the world. And so it's been kind of fun to like see both sides of like consumer reading and book selling and bridging that knowledge gap a little bit.
Yeah. I will say that like, you know, people are like, oh, like, you know, June 15th. And I'm like, that's a Tuesday. And they're like, how did you know that? And I'm like, because books come out on Tuesdays, and I know when like these books that I want to read are coming out. Like, and people are like, oh, I never knew that like all books come out on Tuesdays. And, I think that that's, it's been something that has been really a great joy for me to like organically learn like how publishing and like book selling, like just like, obviously I don't have an intimate knowledge of it, but like I, just have picked things up, so much to the point where like, recently there was, a big conversation about book distribution with Simon and Schuster. And I noticed that there was a lot of confusion out there about like, what does it mean for a publisher to distribute a book? And so because I was like on the Bookstagram side of it, and I saw so many people on Bookstagram who didn't understand how that worked and they didn't know what that meant. And they like it was getting confused. I actually, confirmed with someone who was a friend who worked in book selling and in publishing. And then I put together an infographic that's like, look, here's how this works. And I had so many people who were like, this was so helpful, right? Like I think that, people in publishing would be like, well, obviously people know what distribution partnerships are, but like, that's not so. And, I've actually been thinking about lately, like maybe starting a series on my blog where like, I'm like, put out things like, hey, by the way, like all books come out on Tuesdays. Like, here's what an arc is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, here's like what publicity means in the book world that I've sort of like from like a non-public publicity manager's standpoint, I think could be, a lot of fun to talk about.
It is. People love the behind the scenes. I mean, honestly, the content that does best for us at Word on social is always it's so often it's the behind the scenes stuff and also the slags on Amazon. So those are up there. Speaking of which, just a plug for next week, we're gonna have a great panel talking about Amazon, its impact in the industry. And this is one of the books I picked up when I was upstate. And I'd already read the zine version of this. So there's no excuse for me not to read this quickly. This is short, 112 pages. So teeny from Rough Draft. But Danny Kane's fantastic kind of manifesto about what it means. And like you said, it's important to show people how you're spending your money and how you're choosing to think about your purchases. So, all right, you guys are awesome. That was amazing. Fun stuff. Tell us about some books you're excited about. What are you reading?
It's like such an open-ended question.
I know. I finished a book yesterday, and it's easily one of my favorite books I've ever read, which is a big deal. So I'm feeling like I need to tell everybody.
Yeah.
I brought it over here. It's called Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austin. It's a debut. And I picked it up at work from the galley shelf, mostly because I liked the cover. But it follows this late 20s lesbian atheist who ends up accidentally in a role as a secretary at a Catholic church. And she's wildly awkward and anxious. And it was just like one of the most delightfully real books. It was funny but wholesome. And it's also one of like the best depictions of depression and anxiety I've ever read, like as an internal monologue. It's very like internal monologue. Like most of it is what the main character is thinking in every situation, and kind of panicky, just like about the state of the world. And as someone who is highly anxious, I was like, wow, I want everyone who knows me to read this book and be like, this is what it's like inside my brain. But I don't know. I was just so touched and moved by it. And so now I just feel like I need to like throw it at everyone.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it sounds really great.
You're like the third person I've heard that from. So that's clearly going on.
Oh, great.
On the list.
I convinced one of the Jersey City booksellers to pick it up, so we can talk about it.
Excellent.
I'm surprised that you asked for a book recommendation, and my instinct was fiction, because I feel like my role in life is to be the nonfiction reader with everyone around me, but whatever.
Yeah, I've bought a couple of your recommendations on the nonfiction side so far.
Thank you.
How the Post Office Saved America. I'm going to read that.
Interesting.
I'm a mail junkie. I love mail. It's like my hobby. It's super fun. And I've always loved mail and had pen pals and stuff. And so I need to read that book. It's like part of my summer,
It's also really funny. So
excellent.
I also love
What about
nonfiction. Can you hit us with another nonfiction recommendation?
Well, it's going to sound funny since we just talked about the post office, but there's another one called The Address Book. And it was my favorite nonfiction last year that I read. And it's about addresses. But the subtitle is like, what addresses tell us about wealth and power or something like that. And the author is, I feel like you're at a bar with someone who's wildly knowledgeable about something super weird. And so it doesn't come off like a academic paper at all. It comes off like someone who decided they cared about this topic and then just traveled the world learning about it. Like she talks about the slums in India and how they're trying to bring street addresses to those because there's so much stuff you can't access without an address. Like you can't get a license without an address. You can't claim any social support without one. And there's a whole chapter about Martin Luther King Jr. boulevards all over the U.S. and how different communities have different reactions to it. It was so interesting and one of those infrastructure things that you don't think twice about. I could go on all day about fiction, but that's my current go-to.
Yeah. My favorite nonfiction that I read last year was White Tears, Brown Scars by Ruby Hamad that came out from Catapult. It was like it was like one of those books where like it really truly changed like my perspective of the world and my place in it. In a way that like, I mean, I feel like a lot of nonfiction books can like be like, this should have been a TED Talk until you start to like really get good at choosing them. And like, so I feel like I have, started moving out of that sort of like big idea nonfiction, like, grabby stuff into like what you're talking about, like these like things that are a lot more impactful. And White Tears, Brown Scars, like I actually picked it for like book club at work. Like I was like, everybody needs, it's about the weaponization of like white womanhood. And it was incredible. It was like life-changing. But yeah, that's my current go-to nonfiction recommendation. But
excellent.
I gotta say, I am loving this so much, which I know is not new either. This is not what I thought it was. I don't know if it's the jacket. Like I don't. There's some dissonance between my impression of what this book was and what it is, and I am deeply in love with what it actually is. Right now, I just hate that my attention span is so terrible that I can't just finish it. But ironically, that's sort of what it's about.
So do you want to know my hack for when my attention span is betraying me?
Please.
People think that
coffee?
No, it's not coffee, although I also love coffee. So one thing that I have started doing more lately that I really love and that has become like a pivotal like way that I love to experience books is to listen to the audiobook while I read the book, like in print or in the digital. So like you can turn up the speed so that it's quite fast because you can follow along with your eyes really fast. But today's like narrators and voice actors are incredible. And they add, and especially like for nonfiction, when the author reads it, or like in fiction, if there's a cast, it adds like so much to the experience. But also like often like you want to like see the words on the page because like they're so well crafted and you don't want it to just sort of like fly out of your brain. So one thing that I have shared with everyone that I can speak to is that Toni Morrison narrated her own audiobooks.
Oh.
Yeah. And she's just as good of a narrator as she is of a writer. I listened to Beloved as I read it. So this year, my personal challenge is I'm reading all of her fiction for the first time. And so last month I read Beloved, and like, I can't imagine reading that book without hearing her read it to me. It was an incredible reading experience. And I've started doing it for like all sorts of books. And what's nice is because you can be like, oh, I want to go get chips. Like you don't have to stop. You just close the book and you keep listening. Right. But it really does like kind of like keep your whole brain in the zone. I'm not saying that you should like force yourself to concentrate on books if you really aren't in the mood for it. But like, sometimes you're like, I really wish I could. And I have found that like listening and reading at the same time for me has allowed me to like feel like really immersed in like the story in a way that like is totally new. And the first time I did it actually was when I read the Hilary Mantel books, the like Wolf Hall trilogy, because they're so dense. right? And I
They're
was just like,
really
my
dense.
mind is wandering, but they're also so good. And that was the first time that I did that, and it helped me so much. Another book that really, really was valuable to do that way was, so last year I read through all the books that had previously won the Women's Prize, which was like so much fun and was like a really cool project. And so one of them is called A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. And it was incredible. I actually voted for it to like win like the best of the Women's Prize winners, but it's not written in like sentences. It's like a stream of like subconsciousness. So the words are like in fragments and like impressions, but if you just push through and just like read through it, it starts to make sense. And so also the author narrated that one, and so having her vocalize these fragments really helped me like follow along. And it was a really heavy book, but it was absolutely incredible, and I totally recommend it, especially with the audio. A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing.
I love that idea. It sounds so peaceful and logical. Like, but that never occurred to me. Like,
it's like when your mom like reads to you as a kid.
Yeah. But it's Toni Morrison.
But it's Toni Morrison, right? Exactly. I know.
I'm not a huge audiobook person, but
this month is jazz, and I was really disappointed that it's an abridged version of the audiobook. Like, I was like, who thought that it was good to like cut Toni Morrison off at 3 hours? Like, whatever. Anyway, sorry.
No, I'm not much of an audiobook person, but I listened to Clap When You Land last year, and it now makes me, every time that there's a book in verse, I want to listen to the audio version.
Yeah.
It was such a powerful listen. And when I look at the actual book, I didn't do the double like you're talking about, but when I look at the book, I'm like, I'm not sure I would have had the same experience if I had read this to myself.
Yeah. But I think that verse is a great example, because with verse, like, line breaks can be really artistic, right? In the way that the text is actually laid out. So that's a perfect example for something that you can get value out of like both mediums at once. Yeah.
That is like, that tip is worth the price of admission, I think, today.
I'm free.
Well, you guys, I can't thank you enough for taking time to hang out today and talk books and just sharing some of the behind the scenes fun in Bookstagram town. One day I can't focus. I can never, I've thought about it, because I do tend to put a lot of book content up on my personal Instagram, but then, there's my cat. I really just need to integrate the cat and commit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might be inspired to do it.
Hashtag books and cats is my favorite hashtag. So
right? I mean, for serious, but I just kind of love the way you talk about it, and I love the community, and I'm so grateful that you responded to my blind Instagram message, Deedi.
From a bookstore, always.
Right? As soon as we announced this, I was like, I know exactly who I'm going after. So I've been strategically targeting, but you were number one. So thank you. And maybe we can do this again sometime, because I really enjoyed this conversation.
Anytime.
And I'm going to put all of our recs up online. We're keeping a running list, although I'm behind, because last week we had an amazing lineup, and Dee and Amanda, and oh gosh, I can't remember our other guests, but they recommended like 400,000 books, and they were all amazing. And I'm reading, I promise I have to give a plug to what I'm reading right now, because it's like amazing. 7 Days in June. Have you read that yet?
Mm-mm.
No, but Deidre talks a lot about it.
Okay, Deidre talked me into it. Holly and Deidre, you're my two people who I listen to at the store the most for recommendations. And again, I don't know what I thought. Like, this was another impression thing. The cover's gorgeous. It's like super steamy, sexy, gorgeous. It is such a wonderful, like, I don't know how, it's just great. Like, I want everyone to read it immediately.
I think we need a whole conversation about book covers that misled us. Because
we are good topic.
We're planning it. I'm trying to get a couple book designers to come on and talk too, because I want to hear from them. My friend Henry Yee. Henry, I'm going to tag you in this, so then you will come on, and I want you to do it. He does something really fun. You should follow him, and I'll put his hashtag in the recap. he puts the rejected designs for his, I mean, he did like the cover of Cavalier and Clay. He did Ring Shot. He's done some like really high profile jackets, and he puts the ones that got rejected and which one got finally accepted. Probably other folks do that too, but I know him, so I follow him, and it's so cool because like 9 out of 10 times I disagree with the final version. Like,
there's also the added component of the UK versus the US version.
Yeah,
that's something Bookstagram talks about a lot.
Yeah. However, and my top tip for that is that Blackwell's, which is an independent bookstore, will ship to the US for free. So because you don't want to order from Book Depository because they're owned by Amazon. And I find that a lot of people don't know that. But Book Depository is owned by Amazon, so ditch them. Shop from Blackwell's. They have great prices and they ship to the US for free. And they low-key have the best bookmarks out there.
all right.
Yeah, they're like, wait, here, I have to show you. They're the best.
So that's great for all of our completists who want the covers from the. Oh, that's really lovely.
Isn't it beautiful? And it's like good stock, and you get one with every book. Yeah,
That's a
we love
darn
them.
nice.
For UK books.
You know you're a reporter when you have favorite bookmarks. I'm totally with you. I have my whole set back here.
Important.
And then I could just go find one too. Right? Then I was like, oh, I know exactly where it is. Here's the bookmark.
Yeah, you guys are so good. My bookmarks are usually a crumbled piece of paper. Even though I have bookmarks. Anyway. Thank you. This is awesome. Gonna do a recap. I'm so excited. There was so much good information here that I think people are gonna really love. And thank you. And happy reading.
Yeah.
It's summer, right? It's prime reading time. So everyone's like focused again, although we're all like, yay, vaccines running around like crazy. But we can pause and read in between crazy moments with our friends. So Deedi, Holly, thank you. Have an awesome night. And we'll have you on again soon. It's fun. I feel like Letterman.
For sure. Anytime. Anytime.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for watching. All right.
Bye.